She lived alone for 7 winters, with only a rifle and silence for company, until 6 gunmen arrived seeking shelter. But one of them wasn't just lost in the storm. He was tied to everything she tried to bury. Watch the full story unfold. Where and what time are you watching this? For 7 winters she lived alone in that pine-fringed clearing, a rifle propped beside her front door like a husband who never came home. The cabin, built by hands long dead, creaked in rhythm with the wind that never seemed to rest, and the woman within it, May Whitlock, had learned to let silence be her closest friend. She spoke to no one, wrote to no one, and hadn't set foot in town since the war ended and the man she'd loved bled into a creek bank west of Santa Fe. Out here, time wasn't marked by calendars, but by the sound of wood splitting, the crunch of snow beneath boots, and the number of bullets left in her oilskin pouch. Most folks in town said she'd gone mad, claimed she shot birds for speaking too loud or buried gold beneath her stove. But they also said no man foolish enough to come up her trail ever made it back down the same. May didn't care what they thought. She kept her wood dry, her fire fed, and her rifle cleaned. It was enough, until the storm rolled in. The wind turned violent, scraping through the trees like something searching. And with it came the riders. 6 of them, hunched in their saddles, snow clinging to their coats and beards. Gunmen by the way they moved. Wolves in dusters. She saw them before they saw her, one of the few blessings of living above the ridge. When they finally crested the hill, her rifle was already loaded and resting against her shoulder. They stopped 20 paces from her porch, hands visible, horses steaming in the cold. "Ain't here to cause trouble, ma'am," the one in front called. "Just need shelter. Storm's thick and 2 of ours are sick." May said nothing. She watched their eyes, the way they scanned her cabin, her figure, her gun. 5 of them looked like they wanted to get warm. The 6th looked like he'd been here before. He stared at the place like it remembered him. May narrowed her eyes. She had lived alone for 7 winters. She didn't plan to change that on a mercy. But something in that 6th man's gaze, pried at the edges of her certainty like the cold, through cabin seams. Which one of the 6 gunmen do you think has a history with May? And is it love, betrayal, or something far worse? Share your theory in the comments. May didn't speak for several heartbeats. She simply turned, stepped inside, and left the door open behind her. The message was clear. Enter if you must, but understand that every creak of the floorboard is a choice you'll live or die by. One by one, the men crossed her threshold, boots thudding against the worn pine with a strange sort of reverence. They removed their gloves, not their guns. She watched them silently from the corner, her rifle never more than an arm's length away. They filled the cabin with their breath and dampness and the wild smell of men who'd ridden too long without answers. The one who'd spoken broad-shouldered with a scar splitting his bottom lip offered a nod that May didn't return. He pointed to the youngest of the group, slumped and shivering. "Kid's burning. He won't last the night outside." May moved to her stove, added 2 more logs, and gestured toward the far wall where a rolled quilt lay. Still no words. She wasn't ready to give them that. They settled in awkwardly, like animals unsure if the cave belonged to a bear. 5 of them spoke in low tones, trading glances, whispering names May didn't care to learn. But the 6th man didn't speak at all. He stood near her fireplace, eyes scanning the walls, his face half in shadow. She watched as he tilted his head slightly toward an old photograph, nailed above the mantel warped from smoke and time. It was the only thing left from the life she used to live. A young woman, hair braided tight, sitting on the porch steps, with a man in uniform whose smile was as wide as the sky. The 6th man's jaw flexed. May's stomach turned. He knew the photo. Or worse, he was somehow part of it. He didn't reach for the image, didn't speak her name, but his silence scratched at something deep in her ribs. When the scar-lipped leader began to thank her, May cut him off with a single look. You've got one night, one storm. No fire past midnight, and you sleep with your boots on. The men chuckled nervously. The sixth didn't move. He just watched the fire, and May, and the photo above them both dot. Why do you think the sixth man recognizes the photo? And does May know exactly who he is? Tell us in the comments. The fire dimmed as midnight crept through the boards of the cabin, whispering along the floor and tugging at the corners of every shadow. 5 of the gunmen had given in to exhaustion, curled like dogs near the stove, their breathing rough and uneven. The sixth remained where he'd stood since sundown, half lit, half lost, a statue carved from secrets. May sat at her table, disassembling her rifle with methodical ease, each motion deliberate, each breath steady. She didn't look at him, but she didn't ignore him either. The photograph above the fire had begun to warp slightly in the heat. The edges curled like old paper, surrendering to time, and with it, pieces of a past May had kept nailed to the wall because she couldn't bury it in the earth. She polished the bolt with a cloth, listening. Not to words, there were none but to tension. The kind that sat between two people who knew the same truth, but hadn't yet spoken it aloud. That's him, ain't it? The sixth man finally said. His voice was hoarse, touched with something southern, something buried. May didn't answer. He took a step forward. The man in the photo. The one who died by the creek. Still no reply. She set the bolt down. Her hands stilled. You were there, she said quietly. You saw it happen. He exhaled through his nose. I was more than there. May stood slowly, walking toward the hearth, not to him, but to the picture. Her fingers hovered near it. Then why didn't you bring his body back? The man's jaw clenched. Because I was the one who buried it. Silence swelled like floodwater between them. May didn't blink. And the one who shot him? His eyes lifted to meet hers, steady, tired, and strangely soft. No, that single word wavered in the room like smoke. She believed him. Not because he said it like a man desperate for forgiveness, but because he said it like a man who carried too much truth to lie. She sat back down. The storm howled outside. The others stirred in their sleep. The man stepped forward and knelt by the fire, hands out to warm them. He called your name as he died, he said. Not his mama's, not God's, yours. May's lips parted slightly, but she said nothing. There was no answer that fit. Only the fire between them, the rifle beside her, and the storm that had brought him back. Do you think May brought him in for warmth or for justice? Let us know in the comments. May didn't sleep that night. The storm outside screamed like something alive, but inside the cabin, the silence was heavier than snowfall, thicker than the smoke curling from the hearth. The rifle remained within arm's reach, but her hands never moved for it, not yet. The sixth man, whose name she still hadn't asked for, sat across from her as dawn's first light bled weakly through the frost-glazed windows. The others snored in twisted quilts and saddle blankets, unaware of the slow, unraveling conversation happening only feet away. He trusted you, May said at last. Her voice was hoarse from hours of holding still. I remember that much. Said you were the only one who didn't take the blood money. The man gave a short nod, not defensive, just resigned. I didn't want any of it, but that didn't stop the bullet. She leaned forward, elbows on the table. So what do? You want now? He looked around the room, not at the men, not at the stove, but at the walls, at the photo above the fire, at the grooves in the floor worn by pacing, grieving feet. To give back what I couldn't carry anymore. May's lip twitched. Ain't no redemption left in these hills, only ghosts. The man didn't argue. Instead, he pulled something from his coat, a small, battered tin box wrapped in oilcloth. He slid it across the table to her without a word. May stared at it. She didn't touch it. That his? She asked. The man nodded. Letters, notes, one he never sent addressed to you. Her hands hovered, unsure. The wind shrieked through the chimney, but May's heartbeat was louder. She reached out, took the tin, and held it like something sacred and cursed all at once. The weight of it nearly brought her to tears, but her face remained stone. The sixth man stood then, quietly, and stepped to the door. "Storm's breaking," he murmured. "We'll ride by noon." May looked up. "You speak for all of them?" "No," he said. "Only myself. You staying?" He paused, one hand on the latch. "Do you want me to?" Her eyes drifted to the tin, to the fire, to the empty chair across from her. The silence was answer enough. "Do you think May will open the letters, or leave the past locked away forever? Share your thoughts in the comments." The tin sat on her lap like a sealed grave. May stared at it long after the others had begun to stir, blinking awake one by one, their groggy voices muttering thanks and coughs toward the stove. But none of that reached her. Her fingertips finally peeled back the oilcloth, revealing the battered edges of a soldier's handwriting, creased, faded, and smudged where sweat or tears had once dried. She opened the top letter. The first lines were enough to pierce through the quiet armor she'd worn for years. "May, if you're reading this, that I'm gone and I wasn't strong enough to tell you what I knew." Her hands trembled. The page smelled of tobacco and cedar, and something else, fear. The letter went on, describing the days before the ambush, how he'd grown suspicious of the payroll route, how someone in their unit was passing information. It didn't name the traitor, but it said this: "If anything happens, trust Elijah. He'll bring this back to you." He swore it. May's eyes stung. Elijah. She hadn't heard the name in 7 years. Hadn't known it belonged to the man. Now leaning in her doorway like a remorseful shadow. He hadn't just buried her love. He'd carried his final promise. She looked up at him then, and for the first time since the night they met, her stare didn't feel like a rifle barrel. It felt like a question. "Why now?" she asked. Elijah stepped inside, boots quiet on the planks. "Because I almost didn't make it through this last winter. I figured if I died, and this never got to you, then I'd have failed twice." She nodded slowly, folding the letter back with shaking care. The other men were gathering their gear. The storm was lifting. Sunlight touched the frost outside, and the hills that had been hidden for days emerged again in gold and white. Elijah looked to the saddle near the door. "We'll ride soon." May's voice stopped him. "Not yet." He turned. "No? There's more in that box. I want to know all of it. And I want someone to read it with me who remembers the way he used to laugh." For a long moment, Elijah stood frozen. Then, with careful steps, he returned to the table and sat across from her. Neither spoke as she opened the second letter. "Do you think Elijah is seeking forgiveness, redemption, or something more? Drop your thoughts in the comments." They read the letters one by one, the words like ashes stirred from long cold fires. May didn't cry. She'd done all her weeping in the first winter after the telegram that never came. But the ache in her throat pulsed with every page. Her hands were steadier now, though the tremble lived behind her eyes. Elijah read the third letter aloud, voice low, words careful like they might break. It was dated 2 days before the ambush. "I think there's something wrong with the numbers," it began. "Someone's lying about the route. But they won't listen. Only Eli seems to notice it too." May closed her eyes. That name again, Eli, said like trust, said like faith, said like someone who should have come back with him and didn't. She stared at Elijah, at the lines on his face that hadn't been there before, at the way he still refused to meet her eyes unless she made him. "You were his best friend," she said, not a question. Elijah nodded slowly. "We met before the war. Rode fence lines together for a cattle outfit near Laredo. He was loud. I was quiet. He kept pulling me into the sun when I was content in the shade." May smiled barely. That sounds like him. The kettle hissed. Neither moved to silence it. Elijah looked down at the last letter but didn't touch it. This one he wrote the night before. But it's sealed. May reached for it gently. Her fingers traced the fold. Her name was scrawled on the front in ink that had bled from rain or tears or both. She didn't open it, not yet. Instead, she looked out the window where the other 5 gunmen were mounting their horses, already shifting toward the trail. The storm had lifted. Only one man remained. Elijah rose and walked to the door, watching them go. "They're not bad men," he said. "But they've got nowhere to be that doesn't carry guns and guilt." "And you?" she asked. He turned to her slowly. "I don't know yet." May stood and walked over to him. The letter still lay on the table behind her, unopened. She didn't hand it to him, didn't read it either. She simply said, "You can stay for breakfast." Elijah blinked once, as if stunned by the offer's simplicity. "You sure? I've got coffee," she said, "and only 1 cup. You want it, you stay." The silence that followed wasn't heavy, it was warm. Elijah took off his coat, hung it on the peg beside the door, and nodded. "Then I'll stay." "Do you think May is ready to forgive, or is this just the calm before another storm? Share your thoughts in the comments." The coffee was bitter. Elijah didn't seem to mind. May poured herself half a cup and left the rest for him, watching the steam rise like spirits off the rim. It was quiet now in a different way, the kind of stillness that only came after decisions had been made, when 2 people sat on the edge of something they hadn't named yet. The fire crackled gently. The cabin, always too big for one, somehow felt full now with only the 2 of them inside. May didn't touch the sealed letter. It lay between them like a question neither of them was brave enough to ask. "He wanted you to move east after the war," Elijah said. "Said he'd buy land in Virginia, start a farm. Said you'd have chickens before Christmas." May's mouth curled slightly. "He always hated chickens," Elijah shrugged. "Said it'd make you smile." The silence settled again, but softer now. Familiar. The kind shared between people who've both bled from the same wound. May finally asked, "Why didn't you come back sooner?" Elijah took a sip before answering. "Because every road reminded me of him. And every town had someone looking for me." "You running?" she asked. "I was. Then I got tired of it." May nodded. She understood that kind of tired. Not in the bones, but in the soul. The wind howled faintly through the cracks in the windows, but neither of them looked away. Outside, the trail was marked by fresh hoofprints heading south. The 5 men were gone. They hadn't said goodbye. That was fine. Most goodbyes weren't worth the breath. Elijah leaned back slightly, eyes on the ceiling beams. "You ever think about leaving this place?" "Every day," May said. "And then what?" "And then I don't." The sealed letter still hadn't moved. May reached out, fingertips brushing it, but didn't open it. "Do you want to read it?" she asked. Elijah hesitated. "Only if you do." "I don't know if I'm ready," she admitted. "Maybe. It's not meant to be read. Maybe it's meant to stay a mystery." Elijah's gaze didn't waver. "Maybe the letter isn't the thing he left you. Maybe it's me." May looked at him for a long moment. Then, without a word, she stood, picked up the letter, and walked to the shelf where she kept her father's compass and a jar of dried sage. She placed it there, unopened. The weight of it remained, but the burden. Lesson. Do you think May will ever open the letter? Or has she already found the closure she needed? Tell us in the comments. The day passed slowly, like honey poured in winter. May moved through the cabin with practiced silence, stoking the fire, mending a seam in her coat, checking the traps she'd set just beyond the tree line. Elijah didn't follow her, but he didn't leave either. He spent most of the afternoon near the hearth, his hands busy with a pocket knife and a piece of cedar. May didn't ask what he was carving. She didn't need to. The quiet between them had changed, no longer defensive or grief-thick, but something uncertain, a silence that asked if it might become something else. At sunset, May lit the lantern. The golden light softened the harsh lines in both their faces. She stood near the window, watching the trees sway in the breeze that had replaced the storm. Elijah spoke without looking up. "I remember when he told me about you, said you'd shoot a man for talking too loud." May half smiled. "Still true. He also said you loved sunsets more than sunrises. That true too," she murmured. Elijah nodded, as if confirming a scripture. "He said you looked at dusk like it was something holy." May turned from the window. "Maybe because it's honest. Doesn't pretend to last." He paused his carving. "You're different than I remembered." "You never knew me," she replied. "You only knew who we talked about." That hung between them like wood smoke. Elijah held up the carved piece. It was a bird, small, wings folded, tail arched. "For the window," he said, "to keep the ghosts from flying in." May took it gently, running her thumb over the wings. "What if they already have?" Elijah met her gaze. "Then maybe. They need somewhere to land." The lantern flickered. The sealed letter still sat high on the shelf, unread but present. May didn't reach for it. She placed the carved bird on the windowsill instead, its beak pointed toward the trees. "You, staying through the thaw?" she asked. Elijah hesitated. "Only if I'm welcome." "There's firewood enough for two," she said. "But I don't talk in my sleep. Then I'll listen." "Do you think May and Elijah are building something real, or just sheltering in each other from the storm inside? Let us know in the comments." The knock didn't come loud. Just 3 steady raps at the cabin door, sharp enough to wake the wolves. May's fingers tightened around the rifle in her lap before she even rose from the chair. Elijah had already crossed the room, his hand hovering over the revolver that lay on the windowsill. Outside, no words came. Only the sound of horses shifting in snow and the crackle of torchlight swaying in the breeze. May moved to the window, peeked through the corner just enough. 3 men, cloaked in heavy coats, faces obscured by scarves. And winter grime, but their posture too straight, too sure. "They followed your trail," she whispered. Elijah didn't argue. He already knew. He walked to the table, picked up the letter May hadn't yet opened, and tucked it gently into his coat. "They're not after you," he said, "but they'll come through you to get to me." May stared at him. "Why didn't you tell me?" "You were hunted?" Elijah's jaw tightened. "Because I didn't come here to die. I came to bury something." "You think they'll let you?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped toward the door. May stepped in front of him. "No, May, you brought him back to me," she said. "His letters, his name, your guilt, that's all part of him now. And I ain't letting them take that away twice." She turned, lifted the bar from the door, and opened it a single inch. The snow was falling again, silent and endless. "You got business with the man inside?" she called. One of the strangers stepped forward. "He's got a debt." "One he can't run from no more." May raised her rifle. "Then you'll have to take it from a woman who's been collecting debts longer than any of you been breathing." A pause, then the sound of hands moving to weapons. Elijah moved beside her slowly. "This is my fight." "No," May whispered. "This is my home." The first shot cracked like thunder. May didn't remember pulling the trigger, only the way the door blew open and the cold came screaming inside. Flames leapt in the hearth. Elijah shoved the table over for cover. May dropped behind the woodpile, already reloading. The storm was back, but this one was made of lead and smoke and breathless history. As the gunfire echoed through the trees, May thought only of the bird on the windowsill and the man who never got to finish his letters. Do you think May will survive this storm? And if she does, what will be left of the life she rebuilt? Share your thoughts in the comments. The fire burned low, fed by blood and splintered wood. The snow outside was no longer quiet. It carried the memory of gunfire, of boots fleeing into darkness, of a scream that hadn't come from May's throat in years. When it ended, the storm had taken two of the strangers. The third ran. May didn't chase him. Elijah was on the floor when she found him, breathing but pale, a gash across his ribs and another on his arm. She pulled him to the cot herself, wrapped him in quilts, boiled snow for washing. She stitched with shaking fingers, said nothing while doing it. There were no words left for pain. They both had enough of that. Now as the first gold of morning broke through the window, May sat beside the hearth, her rifle upright beside her like always, though her hands no longer gripped it like a lifeline. Elijah stirred behind her. She didn't turn. "You're lucky I still had thread," she said. "You call that lucky?" His voice was hoarse, but not broken. "You're breathing, aren't you?" "Barely. Still counts." He sat up slowly, groaning. May handed him a tin cup with broth. "I figure you'll want to leave when you can ride again." He didn't answer right away. "Do you want me to?" "Don't ask me questions I can't afford to answer." Elijah looked around the cabin. The photograph above the hearth still hung, smoky and warped. The sealed letter sat on the shelf, untouched. The carved bird on the windowsill faced east now, where the sun melted frost into water. "I didn't come here looking for forgiveness," he said. "Then why did you come?" May finally asked. "To remember him," Elijah replied. "And maybe to be remembered." She stared at the flames. "You killed for me last night." "No, I fought beside you." "There's a difference." May stood and walked to the shelf. She took the letter in both hands, then paused. Slowly, she turned and placed it on the table, then slid it across to him. "Maybe now we read it together." Elijah unfolded it carefully. They didn't speak as he read, just listened to the words of a man long gone who still knew exactly what to say. By the time the sun hit the far wall of the cabin, the letter was done. May's hand found Elijah's, slow but sure. She didn't flinch when he held it. Outside, the trail stretched white and open, but neither of them moved toward it. Do you believe May has finally found peace? Or is peace something you have to choose again each morning? Share your reflections in the comments.